Chapter 1. A normal marriage, or so I thought. The smell of garlic and butter filled the kitchen, clinging to the warm air as I stirred the sauce. I could hear the faint click of Sabrina's heels against the hardwood floor upstairs. She'd come home from work only 10 minutes ago, breezing past me with a quick, distracted kiss before disappearing to change out of her office clothes. It was a Tuesday, nothing special, and for most of our 8-year marriage, that was fine by me. I liked routine. I liked knowing that I'd come home from the construction site, take a hot shower, and cook while Sabrina scrolled through her phone at the counter, telling me about her day. That's what I thought we still had. But lately, things felt different. Sabrina came down the stairs in a fitted sweater and black leggings, her hair still perfectly styled from work. She looked beautiful. As always, Sabrina was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and get noticed. That used to make me proud. Lately, it made me uneasy. She sat at the counter, phone in hand, her eyes flicking to the screen every few seconds. "Smells good," she said absent-mindedly, thumbs tapping away. I slid the pasta into the pot of boiling water and glanced at her. "Thanks. Made it just the way you like it. Extra garlic, extra butter." "You're welcome." She smirked, but didn't look up. Appreciated. I leaned on the counter, crossing my arms. Back in the day, you used to keep me company while I cooked. Now I'm competing with a 5-inch screen for your attention. That finally got her to look at me, though just for a moment. "Richard, it's work. Cassandra's been sending updates for tomorrow's pitch. Big client." "Cassandra," I repeated, letting her name roll off my tongue like it tasted bad. "That's your boss, right? The one who called me Mr. Blue Collar at your Christmas party." Sabrina gave a short laugh. She was joking. "Yeah, sure," I said, pouring the sauce over the pasta. Funny how all her jokes are about me not fitting in with your crowd. She rolled her eyes. "You're reading too much into it." I set the plates down at the table and motioned for her to join me. Maybe, or maybe I just don't like people looking down at me when they've never even seen me work a day in my life. She sat across from me, twirling pasta on her fork. "Cassandra's intense, but she's brilliant. You'd understand if you met her in a work setting, not a party." "Oh, I understand her fine," I said, sitting down. "She's the kind of woman who orders a coffee like she's giving a TED Talk. All confidence, no patience." Sabrina chuckled despite herself. "You're impossible." We ate in silence for a few minutes. I watched her, how her phone stayed face down but within reach, how her gaze kept drifting toward it like there was a magnet pulling at her attention. "So, you've been working late a lot lately," I said casually. "Everything okay?" She nodded, chewing slowly. "Just deadlines. You know how marketing is project pile up, clients change their minds, and we scramble to adjust." "Yeah, I get that. I trailed off, poking at my pasta. "I miss you. Feels like we've been living in different time zones." Her eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. "I know. I've just got to push through this quarter. Things will slow down." I nodded, even though I didn't entirely believe it. "All right. But just so you know, I'm still here. In the same time zone." She smiled faintly and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I know. We finished dinner, and I was rinsing plates in the sink when Sabrina's phone buzzed on the counter. She was already halfway across the kitchen before I even turned my head. She picked it up, read something quickly, and smiled. "Cassandra?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "MHM," she said, slipping the phone into her sweater pocket. "She wants to run through some talking points for tomorrow's meeting. At 8:30 at night." "That's how she is," Sabrina replied, almost defensive. "She's in demand. Clients email her at midnight sometimes." "Guess I'll have to start emailing you during my lunch breaks, just to get a slot in your calendar," I said, smirking. Sabrina gave me a look, half amused, half irritated. "Don't be dramatic." I shrugged and dried my hands. "Just saying. Feels like I'm competing with a whole corporation for your attention." She came over, looping her arms loosely around my waist. "You're not competing with anyone." But the hug was brief, almost perfunctory. She pulled away first. Later that night, as we sat on the couch, Sabrina opened her laptop. A sleek, silver model, nothing like my beat-up old one for billing my clients. She was on a video call. I was only half paying attention until I heard a voice, sharp and confident, coming through the speakers. "Sabrina, you're still up?" "You're a trooper," the voice said, with a hint of amusement. Sabrina smiled. Well, you said you wanted this by morning, Cassandra. So this was Cassandra Grant. I leaned forward slightly, curious. The camera showed her, mid-40s, elegant, hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her lipstick was the kind of deep red you only see in magazines. She had the kind of presence that made people straighten their posture without realizing it. Sabrina turned the laptop slightly. Cassandra, this is my husband, Richard. Cassandra's eyes flicked to me, scanning like a security camera. Ah, the construction man. I gave a polite nod. That's me. She smiled thinly. I admire anyone who works with their hands. It's quaint, like I was an antique tool she found at a flea market. Sabrina didn't notice my jaw tighten, but Cassandra probably did. Well, Cassandra continued, I won't keep you. We have work to do. Nice meeting you, Richard. The screen shifted back to Sabrina's project notes, and I leaned back on the couch. Nice meeting you? No, that was Cassandra Grant sizing me up and writing me off in the same breath. And for the first time in a long while, I had the feeling my marriage was about to start changing in ways I didn't like. Chapter 2, The First Red Flags. It started with a casual comment over breakfast. Sabrina was standing at the counter, scrolling through her phone as I buttered toast. She had her hair up in one of those neat, professional buns, the kind she used to reserve for important meetings. Oh, she said almost offhand, Cassandra's hosting a little gathering next Friday. Just some work people getting together. I sipped my coffee. Sounds nice. Where at? Some rooftop lounge downtown. New place. Supposed to have great cocktails. She kept her eyes on her phone. I leaned against the counter. Wanting to come with you? That got her attention. She looked up, a flicker of hesitation passing across her face before she smoothed it over with a smile. It's really just for work people. You know, team bonding. I raised an eyebrow. What? Spouses aren't part of the bonding experience. She chuckled, but it was the kind of laugh that buys time. It's not that. I don't think you'd enjoy it. It's very corporate. Corporate, I repeated. I can handle corporate. I've been in a suit before. She gave me a long look, like she was trying to figure out how to say something without saying it. It's not about the suit, Richard. It's, I don't know. You might feel out of place. There it was. I set my coffee down and crossed my arms. You mean I might not fit in with your crowd? Sabrina winced slightly. No, I'm just saying these people, well, they're a little different from what you're used to. It's all marketing jargon and client talk. I wouldn't want you to be bored. I forced a smile. I'm a grown man, Sabrina. I can fake interest in small talk for a couple of hours if it means being by your side. She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It's not a big deal. Really, we'll have our own night soon, just us. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The following week, I started noticing small changes. Sabrina had always dressed well for work, but now there was extra effort. Dresses I hadn't seen in years were suddenly hanging in the closet again. She was wearing heels more often, heels she used to complain about after just an hour. One morning, I was tying my boots when she came down in a navy dress that hugged her figure just enough to make my chest tighten. Her makeup was subtle but polished, her hair styled in loose waves instead of her usual bun. Wow, I said, standing back. You look incredible. She smiled, grabbing her travel mug. Thanks. Big client presentation today. I nodded, but something nagged at me. I knew her presentation days. They were stressful, all about PowerPoints and talking points. This felt different. She looked date-ready. Then came the phone thing. Sabrina had always been a quick texter, but lately her phone might as well have been glued to her hand. Even when we watched TV, she'd tilt the screen away slightly, as if guarding it from my line of sight. One night, I heard the faint buzz of her phone while I was in the garage. While I walked in, she was already holding it, thumb tapping quickly. Who's that? I asked casually. She didn't look up. Cassandra. Going over tomorrow's schedule. At 9:30 at night? She's a night owl, Sabrina said, still typing. I watched her for a moment. You used to complain about work texting after hours. She finally set the phone down and met my eyes. I told you this quarter's intense. It won't always be like this. I wanted to believe her. God knows I tried. The changes kept piling up, little things like her perfume. Sabrina had a light, floral scent she wore occasionally, usually for special dinners. Suddenly, she was wearing it 3 or 4 times a week. or the way she'd come home from work flushed and smiling, even on days she claimed had been stressful. One Thursday, I got home early from the site. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but she'd texted me 2 hours earlier saying she was wrapping up at the office. When she finally came in, she was carrying a bag from a bakery downtown, the kind that closes at 6 p.m. She brushed off my questions with a laugh. Cassandra had a craving, so I tagged along for a pastry run. But the knot in my gut didn't go away. Friday rolled around, the night of her work gathering. I was in the kitchen when she came down in a sleek black dress and those red heels I remembered from our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Her hair was curled, lips painted just enough to look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I leaned on the counter, arms crossed. You're telling me again I wouldn't fit in with this crowd? She adjusted an earring, not meeting my eyes. Richard, I'm asking because you look like you're going to a gala, not some rooftop drinks with coworkers. She exhaled, finally looking at me. I just want to make a good impression. These events matter. And what? I messed that up. My tone was sharper than I intended. Her jaw tightened. You know that's not what I'm saying. It's complicated. Please don't make this a fight. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Fine. Go. Knock him dead. She gave me a quick kiss, quick enough to feel like a formality, and grabbed her clutch. That night, I tried to distract myself with a game on TV, but my mind kept drifting. I pictured her under the string lights of some fancy rooftop, laughing with her work people, maybe leaning a little too close to someone when the music was loud. It was stupid, I told myself. She was my wife. She'd never, but the thought stuck there, heavy, pressing. I stayed up until she came home, just before midnight. She was flushed from the cold, hair slightly windblown. How was it? I asked. Good. Productive, she said, kicking off her heels. Met some new clients. Cassandra was happy. Uh-huh, I said, watching her disappear upstairs without another word. I sat there alone for a long time, the sound of her footsteps fading, that same nagging feeling twisting tighter in my chest. Chapter 3, The Social Gathering Invitation. It was a Tuesday evening when Sabrina came into the living room with that look, the one she wore when she was about to ask for something but wanted to make it sound like she was doing me a favor. I was halfway through a cold beer, watching highlights from the weekend's game, when she sat down next to me. Her perfume drifted over first, followed by the faint click of her phone hitting the coffee table. So, she began, tucking her legs under her, Cassandra's been on me about this upcoming dinner event at work. I didn't look away from the TV just yet. And she thinks you should come. That made me glance over. Cassandra thinks I should come? Sabrina smirked. Well, she said it'd be good for me to show off my husband to the team. Her words, not mine. I set the beer down. That's interesting. A week ago, I was not fitting in with your work people. Now, suddenly, I'm an accessory for the evening. Sabrina sighed. Richard, please. She just wants everyone to mingle, spouses included. I told her you might not be into that sort of thing, but she insisted. I studied her face. There was a tightness in her smile, like she wasn't entirely thrilled about it herself. Fine, I said. I'll come. Great, she said almost too quickly. Then she added, but there are a few things we should probably go over before you meet everyone. That few things turned into an hour-long crash course on how not to embarrass her in front of her colleagues. We were at the kitchen table. She had her laptop open, flipping through photos of people I didn't know. That's Derek. He handles the tech accounts. He's really into golf. So maybe don't mention you've never played. Oh, and that's Dana. She's vegan, so maybe don't talk about hunting or barbecue. I lean back in my chair. You make it sound like I'm some wild animal you're trying to tame before taking me out in public. I'm just trying to prepare you, she said. These people, they're different. They'll talk about industry trends, client conversions, brand awareness. Sabrina, I interrupted. I can have a polite conversation without slipping into construction site banter, okay? I know how to act. She gave me a thin smile. I know. I just wanted to go well. Friday night came faster than I expected. I pulled my best suit from the closet, a charcoal gray I'd worn to weddings and a few important business meetings of my own. I shined my shoes, ironed my shirt, and even splurged on a haircut earlier in the week. When I came downstairs, Sabrina was in a deep green dress that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup flawless. She looked at me and said, "Not bad," in a tone that was meant to be teasing, but it landed just shy of condescending. I straightened my tie. "Don't worry. I'll try not to embarrass you." The drive downtown was quiet, save for her occasional reminders. "Remember, Cassandra can be blunt, but don't take it personally. And if someone asks what you do, just keep it short. Not everyone gets the whole construction world." I bit back a comment and kept my eyes on the road. The venue was a high-rise hotel with a rooftop restaurant. From the moment we stepped out of the elevator, I knew I was out of my element. The place glowed with warm lighting, the walls lined with modern art I couldn't name. Waiters in crisp black uniforms moved silently between tables carrying trays of champagne flutes. Sabrina's posture shifted as soon as we walked in. Her smile widened, her voice took on a polished tone, and she greeted her coworkers like she'd been rehearsing it all week. I hung back a step, taking it in. Most of the men wore slim-fit suits that probably cost more than my truck payment. The women wore dresses in rich fabrics, every detail immaculate. And then there was me, polished, sure, but with calloused hands and a face that had seen more sun than any of theirs. Cassandra appeared before I had time to look for her. She was in a sharp navy dress, hair in that severe bun again, lips painted like she was making a statement. "Richard," she said, extending a hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So glad you could make it." I shook her hand firmly. "Thanks for inviting me." "Sabrina's been keeping you hidden away," she said, glancing at Sabrina with a knowing smirk. Sabrina laughed lightly. "He's just been busy with work." Cassandra's eyes returned to me. "Construction, right? You build things." "That's right," I said evenly. "Mostly commercial projects. Offices, storefronts." "How practical," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching as if she'd almost said something else. Before I could reply, she gestured toward the far side of the room. "Come on, let's get you a drink." We mingled, or rather, Sabrina mingled while I stood nearby, shaking hands and answering polite but vaguely dismissive questions. One man asked if I'd ever worked on luxury homes for celebrities. When I said no, he nodded as if confirming some private theory. Another woman asked if my job was dangerous in a way that made it sound like she thought I was a stuntman. Sabrina floated between groups like she belonged there. I watched her laugh at a joke I couldn't hear, lean in close to someone to speak over the music, touch a coworker's arm lightly in that easy, familiar way she used when she wanted to make a point. I reminded myself to stay calm, to keep my pride in check. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here for her. But as I stood there with a glass of bourbon, I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how well I dressed, no matter how polite I was, I'd always be the outsider in her world. By the time we sat for dinner, I'd been introduced to at least a dozen people whose names I'd already forgotten. The tables were covered in white linen, the cutlery arranged with military precision. The view of the city skyline was stunning, but even that couldn't distract me from the quiet hum of conversation about quarterly reports and market shares. I glanced around and realized I was the only man here without some kind of corporate title. I had my own business, sure, but in this room, that was like saying I had a nice garden compared to their sprawling estates. Sabrina touched my knee under the table and smiled at me like everything was fine. I smiled back, but inside I couldn't ignore the truth. I was clearly the only one from a working-class background. Chapter 4. The Humiliation. Dinner seating was arranged with the precision of a wedding reception. Each round table glittered under the soft overhead lighting, draped in white linen, silver cutlery polished to a mirror shine. Place cards and swirling gold calligraphy rested neatly above each charger plate. Sabrina and I walked toward our assigned table, her hand lightly hooked in my arm. I could hear the hum of conversation from nearby tables, low, sophisticated, punctuated by the occasional laugh. "There we are," Sabrina said, pointing to the center table, where Cassandra sat like a queen at court. I walked around the table, scanning for my name. My eyes landed on it, and my stomach dropped. Idiot trash. Not Richard. Not even some clever nickname. Just those two words, written in perfect, looping script, like they belonged on a wedding invitation. For a second, I thought maybe it was some kind of mistake, a mix-up, but the smirk on Cassandra's face told me otherwise. Sabrina saw it too. She pressed her lips together, But instead of outrage, her shoulders started shaking. Within seconds, she was laughing, actually laughing, covering her mouth like she was trying to be discreet. Cassandra chuckled openly. Oh, come on, it's just a bit of fun. A few others at the table joined in, their laughter tight and knowing. One man across from me smirked but avoided meeting my eyes. Another woman looked down at her napkin, suddenly fascinated with the stitching. I stood there, staring at that card, heat creeping up my neck. My first instinct was to flip the table and walk out. My second was to grab whoever wrote it and ask them if they'd say it to my face outside. Instead, I forced a laugh. Well, I said, sliding into my chair, at least you splurged on the calligraphy. A couple of people chuckled politely, though it was the kind of laugh you give when you're not sure which side you're supposed to be on. Inside, my thoughts were a storm. Idiot trash? Really? This is what passes for humor in Sabrina's world? And she's laughing along with them? I glanced at Sabrina. She was already leaning toward Cassandra, whispering something that made them both grin. The waiter poured wine, and the table conversation picked up again about quarterly projections, upcoming campaigns, the latest luxury resort someone had stayed at. I sat there, nodding occasionally, waiting for Sabrina to say something, anything, to defend me. But all I got was a light tap on my leg under the table. It's just an inside joke, she murmured, as if that excused everything. I turned to her, keeping my voice low. Inside joke? Between who? You and your boss. She gave me a tight smile. You're overreacting. Cassandra likes to tease. Tease? This wasn't a jab about my football team losing. This was a label. One that everyone at this table just saw me sit in front of. Cassandra, clearly pleased with herself, leaned forward. Richard, you're taking this well. Most men wouldn't be so gracious. Guess I'm just adaptable, I said, forcing my tone to stay even. She tilted her head, that smile never wavering. Not everyone can handle this environment. Some people are just out of their league, and that's okay. It's charming in its own way. The way she said charming made it sound like pathetic. I met her gaze and held it for a moment longer than was polite. I don't know, Cassandra. Sometimes being out of your league means you're aiming higher than the crowd you're stuck with. That got a couple of surprised glances from around the table, and even one suppressed laugh from a man 2 seats down. Cassandra's smile froze for half a second before returning. Dinner was served, some delicate plate of seared fish with vegetables arranged like a magazine spread. I cut into it mechanically, my mind still circling the place card. Sabrina tried to shift the conversation to safer topics. Richard's been working on a new office complex downtown. It's a big project. Cassandra nodded without looking at me. Yes, Sabrina mentioned. Practical work. Necessary. She sipped her wine, adding, though I suppose it's very different from what we do. Yeah, I said, setting my fork down. I actually have to see the results of my work standing in front of me. You know, walls, foundations, things that hold up under pressure. The jab was subtle, but a few people caught it. One man coughed into his napkin. Sabrina's smile tightened again, but she didn't call me out. Maybe she knew I wasn't in the mood to be her well-trained accessory tonight. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I kept my comments short, my expression polite, but inside, I was cataloging every smirk, every sideways glance, every laugh at my expense. It wasn't just the name card, it was the way they saw me. The working-class husband. The +1 who didn't belong in their glossy little circle. Sabrina kept leaning into Cassandra's space, nodding along to whatever she said, laughing just a fraction louder than she needed to. I caught her making eye contact with others at the table when Cassandra spoke, like she was part of some unspoken hierarchy. I wondered, not for the first time, if she liked being in this world more than she liked being in mine. When dessert came, some tiny chocolate creation barely the size of a golf ball, I noticed Cassandra glance at my place card again. She seemed to be enjoying the fact that I hadn't crumpled it up or walked out. I left it there, untouched. Part of me wanted her to see that I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, I smiled at her across the table. You know, Cassandra, I should thank you. Her eyebrows lifted. For what? For making sure everyone here knows my name, even if you had to make one up. Means I left an impression. There was a pause before she laughed, a short, sharp sound. Yes, Richard, you certainly have. And that was that. Sabrina, of course, downplayed the whole thing when the plates were cleared. "You're really making too much of it," she whispered as we stood to leave. I didn't answer. Not yet. My jaw was tight, my hands steady. If she couldn't see the difference between harmless teasing and public disrespect, then maybe she didn't want to. Cassandra was still smirking as we walked away from the table, and her words echoed in my head. Some people are just out of their league here. Chapter 5, The Boiling Point. By the time the entree plates were cleared, I was already tired of the whole act. The polite smiles, the carefully measured small talk, the way Cassandra seemed to orbit every conversation. Sabrina had like a planet that didn't want to let its moon drift too far. But then he walked in. Derek Brooks. I recognized the name from Sabrina's stories. Always in passing, always with a tone that was just a little too light. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with that kind of effortless, movie poster good looks. Dark hair, square jaw, perfectly fitted suit. He had the confident stride of someone who knew he didn't need to try to get attention. Sabrina spotted him instantly. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen all evening. "Derek," she called, rising slightly from her seat and giving him a little wave. He grinned, walking over with a champagne flute in hand. "Sabrina, you look incredible tonight." She laughed, soft, almost shy, and touched his arm as he leaned in to greet her. Not a hug exactly, but close enough that I could smell his cologne from across the table. "And this must be Richard," Derek said, turning to me with a practiced smile. "That's right," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but it had the calculated firmness of a man who'd practiced in front of a mirror. "Good to finally meet you," he said. "Sabrina's told me a lot about you." I glanced at her. "Oh yeah? All good things, I hope." Sabrina smiled tightly, but she didn't elaborate. Derek just chuckled and moved to sit in the empty seat beside her. That's when I noticed it. The way she angled her body slightly toward him. The way her eyes lingered on his when he spoke. The way her hand, resting casually on her lap, shifted just enough that it brushed his knee under the table. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But I've been married to Sabrina for 8 years. I knew her cues. I knew that half smile she gave when she wanted someone to feel special. And suddenly, all those late nights, the extra effort in her outfits, the perfume, they weren't just random quirks. I kept my expression neutral, sipping my bourbon as they talked in low voices. Every now and then, Derek leaned closer, his hand briefly touching her forearm when he made a point. Each touch was quick, almost innocent, almost. The conversations at the table blurred around me. Cassandra was talking about some client gala. A man across from me was describing his recent trip to Dubai, but my focus stayed locked on Sabrina and Derek. Her laughter sounded different with him, lighter, unguarded. The same laugh she used to give me when we were first dating. I felt my chest tighten, a slow, burning pressure spreading up toward my throat. My mind started replaying the past month like a reel, her coming home late, her phone always in her hand, her sudden disinterest in our evenings together. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay seated. If I reacted now, I'd look like exactly what Cassandra probably wanted, a jealous, insecure husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. So I stood adjusting my tie, gonna grab another drink. I murmured to no one in particular. The bar was at the far end of the rooftop, bathed in soft amber lighting. I ordered another bourbon and positioned myself near the corner where I could still see the table without being obvious about it. From this angle, it was worse. I saw Derek lean in to whisper something to Sabrina, saw her hand cover her mouth as she laughed, saw the way she lightly touched his wrist in response. I swallowed hard, willing myself to take slow, measured breaths. My knuckles whitened around the glass. "Don't make a scene. Not here. Not yet." That's when I heard it. 2 employees, both in suits, both with that tipsy looseness that comes from too much champagne, were standing a few feet away from me, facing the bar. One of them, a man with slick back hair, said, "I'm telling you, Derek's playing with fire." "She's married." The other chuckled. "Yeah, but you've seen them together. It's like they forget anyone else is in the room." Slick hair laughed. "Cassandra's not going to stop it, either. She practically encourages it. Loves the drama." The second man smirked. "I just wonder how far they've actually taken it. I mean, The way she was looking at him during the presentation last week. Damn. I froze, my grip tightening around my drink. I didn't move. Didn't say a word. Just listened as they kept talking, speculating, joking, tossing around little details that made my stomach twist. They mentioned late-night project meetings, drinks after work, accidental Uber rides home together. It was all half said, half implied, but there was enough there to connect the dots. Finally, one of them noticed me standing nearby. They exchanged a quick glance, the kind people give when they've been caught saying something they shouldn't. I turned to face them fully. "Don't stop on my account," I said, my voice low but steady. The second man cleared his throat. "We were just talking, yeah." I cut in, finishing my drink in one swallow. "I know exactly what you're talking about." I set the empty glass on the bar and walked away before either of them could respond. As I made my way back to the table, I kept my face calm, my steps measured. Inside, though, the pressure in my chest had turned into something sharper, something cold. When I reached the table, Derek was telling some story that had Sabrina smiling like they were the only two people in the room. She didn't even notice me sit back down. I picked up my napkin, placed it neatly in my lap, and looked across the table at Cassandra. She was watching me, not Sabrina, not Derek, just me. And I swear there was the faintest trace of a knowing smile on her face. Chapter 6, The Confrontation at the Event. I came back to the table with the calm, slow walk of a man who didn't want to raise suspicion, at least not yet. But inside, my thoughts were pounding like a drumline. Sabrina was mid-laugh when she finally noticed me sliding back into my seat. Derek's hand was still resting close enough to hers that a single twitch would have connected them. I folded my napkin in my lap, leaned forward, and said quietly, "So, how long's this been going on?" Sabrina blinked. "What?" I kept my voice low, my tone flat. "You and Mr. Brooks here. How long have you been playing this little game?" Her smile froze, the color in her cheeks draining just slightly. "Richard, don't start." Derek's head tilted, an amused smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm not sure what you mean." I turned my gaze to him. "You know exactly what I mean." Sabrina set her wine glass down with a soft clink. "It's not what you think. We're just friends. Co-workers." "That's funny," I said, "because your co-worker seems to have a habit of whispering in your ear like he's telling you state secrets. And you got a habit of touching his knee under the table. I guess that's just corporate etiquette now." Before Sabrina could respond, Cassandra's voice cut in, smooth and dripping with condescension. "Oh, Richard," she said, leaning forward on her elbows. "It's adorable, this whole jealous husband act. Very small-town romantic comedy. You should try trusting your wife. Not every man who's better dressed than you is a threat." I gave her a slow, deliberate smile. "And not every woman who hides behind a glass of Chardonnay is as clever as she thinks she is." Her eyes narrowed just enough for me to notice. Cassandra straightened her posture. "This is exactly what I was telling Sabrina would happen. You bring a man like this," she waved her hand vaguely toward me, "into an environment he's not used to, and of course he gets insecure. Blue-collar types tend to mistake sophistication for impropriety." I chuckled under my breath, shaking my head. "You're right, Cassandra. I am not used to this environment. Where I come from, people actually mean what they say, and they don't need to play footsie with someone else's wife to feel important." Derek's smirk faded. "Hey, watch yourself." I turned toward him, resting my chin on my hand. "What's the matter, Brooks? Not used to someone calling you out without a memo first? Or do you just save all your tough talk for the break room when no one's listening?" He straightened his jacket. "You've got the wrong idea about me." "Really?" I said, leaning forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've got all the classic symptoms. Too much cologne, not enough backbone. The corporate tough guy thing works great on interns, but trust me, you don't want to test it on someone who actually worked for a living." A couple of nearby guests were now openly listening, their conversations slowing to a crawl. Cassandra noticed too and gave me a look that was half annoyed, half calculating. Sabrina shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands twisting in her lap. "Richard, please. You're making a scene." "No," I said evenly. "I'm making a point." Cassandra's voice turned sharper. "You think you're being clever, but all you're doing is proving exactly what I said. Small mind, small world. This is why Sabrina hesitated to bring you here. I raised my glass in her direction. And here I thought it was because you were worried I might see through the little soap opera you've got running in your office. Derek scoffed. You're out of line, man. I set my glass down. No, Derek, you are. And deep down, you know it. Sabrina's eyes darted between us, her lips parting like she might step in, but she didn't. She just looked down at her plate, the tip of her fork dragging slowly through her untouched food. And in that moment, her silence said more than anything she could have defended me with. Chapter 7. Cutting Ties. The dinner was winding down, the wine bottles mostly empty, dessert plates scattered with half-melted traces of chocolate. The polite chatter of the remaining guests swirled around the room, but I wasn't really hearing it. My mind was a tight, focused coil. Sabrina had tried to slip back into casual conversation after the earlier tension, but her laughter felt forced, her eyes avoiding mine. Derek had conveniently drifted to the far end of the table, keeping himself busy with other coworkers. Cassandra, ever the queen bee, was still holding court with a couple of her inner circle, casting occasional glances my way like she was daring me to speak up again. But my attention was fixed elsewhere, on a man I'd only seen in glossy photos and heard about in passing. Henry Collins, president of the firm. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably tailored in a navy suit that probably cost more than my truck. He carried himself with the easy authority of someone used to running the room. I watched him laugh with two men in expensive watches near the front of the venue. Sabrina had mentioned him only a handful of times, always with a respectful tone, always quick to note how much he valued professionalism. Funny, given the circus act his employees had just put on tonight. I decided it was time. I stood from my chair slowly, pushing it back with deliberate care. Sabrina's eyes flicked toward me, uncertainty flashing across her face. Where are you going? She asked. Just need to have a word with your boss, I said, straightening my jacket. Her brow furrowed. Richard, please, let's just go home. Don't, but I was already walking. Henry noticed me coming and offered a polite smile, the kind businessmen use on people they don't know, but assume might be useful. Evening, he said. You must be Sabrina's husband. Richard, right? I stopped a comfortable distance from him, clasping my hands loosely in front of me. That's me. He extended his hand. I took it firmly, not crushing, but enough to let him know I wasn't the kind of man who gave a limp shake. Hope you've enjoyed the night, he said, tone light. I held his gaze. Not particularly. His smile faltered just a fraction. Oh, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough that it was still audible to his companions if they wanted to listen. I'll make this quick, Mr. Collins. I'm cutting ties with you, your company, and your people. And soon, I glanced over my shoulder toward Sabrina, who was now watching from our table, eyes wide. She'll be free to crawl back here full time. There was a beat of silence, just long enough for his companions to shift uncomfortably. Henry straightened his tie. I'm not sure I follow. Oh, you follow, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. You run this ship, so I assume you know the kind of culture you've got here, how your employees treat people who don't fit their little mold, how they laugh at them, mock them, and how some of them get a little too friendly with other people's wives. Henry's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. If something inappropriate happened tonight, we could discuss it privately. Not interested, I cut in. This isn't me asking for an apology. This is me telling you that whatever connection you thought you had to my life ends tonight. From behind me, I heard Sabrina's heels clicking across the floor. Richard. Her voice was low but urgent. What are you doing? I didn't turn to look at her. Henry gave a practice smile, like he was trying to smooth over a PR issue. Sabrina is a valued member of our team. I'd hate for something personal to. I held up a hand. She's your problem now, Collins. All of you are. But me? I'm done playing the part of the supportive husband who shows up to be humiliated so your little elite circle can get their kicks. Sabrina stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm. Can we just talk about this later? You're blowing this way out of proportion. I finally turned to her. Out of proportion? I asked, my voice low but hard. You sat there while they laughed at me. You didn't defend me once. And when I called out the guy you've been eyeing all night, you looked at him like you were the one protecting him. Her mouth opened, then closed again. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I said. Henry cleared his throat, clearly wanting to steer the conversation away from the personal. "Look, Mr. Hawthorne, we appreciate you coming tonight. I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding." I turned back to him. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what it looked like. And I've got better things to do than stand here pretending otherwise. Without waiting for a response, I stepped past Sabrina and began walking toward the exit. The air felt warmer, heavier, as the eyes of half the room tracked me. I heard her calling after me, "Richard, wait," but I didn't. My boots hit the polished marble floor in steady, measured beats. Each step felt like I was shedding another layer of the evening's weight, but the anger didn't dissipate. It settled deeper, quieter, harder. By the time I reached the door, the cool night air hit my face like a wake-up slap. I didn't stop to breathe it in. I just kept walking toward the parking lot, the sounds of the dinner fading behind me. I didn't know yet what I was going to do tomorrow or the day after that. But I knew one thing, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 8, Discovery of the Affair. The house was quiet when I got home. Too quiet. Sabrina wasn't back yet, and I didn't expect her to be, not after the way I walked out of that event. I tossed my jacket over the arm of the couch and sat there in the dark for a few minutes, my mind replaying every look, every whisper between her and Derek. It was like a movie reel that wouldn't stop spinning, every frame cutting deeper. I told myself for weeks that I was overthinking it, that the late nights were just part of her job, that the sudden wardrobe changes, the new perfume, the way she'd tilt her phone away when she texted, none of it meant anything. But now I needed the truth. Not the half answers she'd give me. Not the "you're imagining things" routine. The truth. Cold and undeniable. I started with the phone bill. Sabrina had left her laptop bag in the corner, and I remembered she'd recently switched to paperless billing for convenience. I logged into our joint account online. Scrolling down the call log, I noticed a number that repeated over and over, short calls during the day, longer ones late at night. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, at least not under a name. But I knew numbers from memory, and this one, it wasn't random. I copied it into a search. Derek Brooks. The screen might as well have punched me in the gut. I sat there for a moment, staring at the glow of the monitor, my knuckles tightening around the edge of the desk until it creaked. My breathing got heavier, but I forced it steady. Don't just get angry. Get proof. Her email was next. She used the same password for almost everything. I didn't want to believe it would be this easy, but it was. And there it was, a thread of messages stretching back weeks. Some mundane. Others, not so much. Derek, last night was perfect. Same place next week. Sabrina, you read my mind. I can't stop thinking about it. I scrolled further. Dinner plans disguised as work meetings. Photos of hotel lobbies. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Then the receipts, scanned confirmations from a boutique hotel downtown. Always booked for after-hours business discussions. Always 2 guests. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My head felt heavy, my throat tight. I wanted to yell, to smash something, to walk outside and never come back. But instead, I just sat there. Because in between the waves of rage, there was this other feeling creeping in, shame. Not for something I'd done, but for the fact that I'd let myself be the fool. That I'd ignored the signs. Flashbacks started hitting me in random flashes. The night she came home, late smelling faintly of cologne, saying she'd been working with Cassandra. The time she laughed at a text while I was making dinner, and when I asked what was funny, she said it was just work banter and changed the subject. The new lingerie she bought for herself, but never once wore around me. I'd brushed them all aside, telling myself marriage had ups and downs, that this was just a phase. I shut the laptop, the sound echoing in the empty room. My reflection in the darkened screen stared back, jaw clenched, eyes hard. I stood and paced the living room. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the way every nerve in my body was lit up like a fuse. When I finally stopped pacing, I found myself by the window, staring out at the quiet street. My thoughts were running in 2 tracks, one screaming, "How could she?" The other already calculated my next steps. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat at the kitchen table. The amber liquid burned its way down, but it didn't soften anything. If anything, it sharpened it. Because now I wasn't just a husband with suspicions. I was a man with evidence. My phone buzzed. A text from Sabrina. Heading home soon. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to type without letting her know what I'd found. Not yet. I looked at the pile of receipts, the printed call logs, the forwarded emails sitting neatly in a folder on the table. My proof. And I knew this wasn't going to end in shouting matches or tearful apologies. It was going to end on my terms. I leaned back in my chair, the folder in front of me, the weight of it both crushing and steadying me at the same time. The rage was still there, yes, but beneath it, something colder was taking shape. A plan. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel powerless. Chapter 9. The Revenge and the Leaving. The morning after I uncovered the truth, I didn't storm into her office or scream accusations across the breakfast table. No, that's what amateurs do. And I wasn't about to give her, or Derek, the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I made coffee. I even left her a mug on the counter before heading out. She wouldn't suspect a thing. That was the beauty of it. I spent the day making calls. Not emotional ones to friends or family, but quiet, precise calls to people I knew would matter. The first was to Elliot Jensen, an old friend who worked in corporate compliance for a different firm, but knew people in HR circles. I fed him just enough to get his interest. Me. Hypothetically, what would HR do if two employees, one married, were caught using company time and resources for personal activities? Elliot. Chuckling, depends on the company. But if there's proof, they'd have to act. Liability, you know. Me. What if that proof landed anonymously on the right desk? Elliot. Then it wouldn't stay quiet for long. That afternoon, I composed the perfect anonymous email. Professional. No messy emotion. No obvious ties back to me. Just facts. I attached copies of the hotel receipts, paid with Sabrina's company card for client meetings, and a handful of her most incriminating messages to Derek. The subject line was simple. Urgent. Violation of company policy and code of conduct. I sent it to Cassandra Grant and CC'd the firm's HR director. I knew Cassandra well enough to know she'd act, not out of moral outrage, but because the company's image came before loyalty to her staff. The next step was Derek. I had his personal email from the phone records. Using another anonymous account, I forwarded him a fake internal HR memo warning employees about recent investigations into conduct violations. It was petty, but I wanted him sweating before anything official even hit his desk. 2 days later, the dominoes began to fall. Sabrina came home early, her heels clicking angrily against the hardwood. She dropped her bag on the table like it had betrayed her. Sabrina. I've been put on leave. Without pay. Me. Looking up from my coffee. Calm as ever, really? What? Sabrina. They said some anonymous complaint came in. About me and Derek. She crossed her arms, glaring. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I took a slow sip before answering. Me. Why would I? I'm just a trash guy who doesn't fit in with your work people. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She just stood there, breathing hard, like she wanted to scream, but didn't know where to start. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. Elliot, your guy Derek? HR's got him in a meeting right now. Word is they're freezing him out. Perfect. The next morning, I went to see my lawyer. I'd already collected more than enough proof for a divorce on grounds of infidelity. The paperwork was straightforward. By the time I left his office, the documents were neatly sealed in an envelope, ready for delivery. When I got home, Sabrina was in the kitchen scrolling her phone, tension practically rolling off her. She glanced at me, but didn't speak. I walked past her, set the envelope on the counter, and stood there until she noticed it. She picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling when she saw her name printed at the top. Sabrina. Richard, what is this? Me. Divorce papers. Her eyes widened, but I didn't give her time to launch into excuses or tears. Me. You laugh when they call me trash, but you're the one I'm taking out with the garbage. Chapter 10. The New Life. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and new beginnings. The sunlight slanted through half-open blinds, casting stripes across the hardwood floor. Boxes were stacked neatly against the wall, labeled with things I hadn't unpacked yet, reminders of the old life I wasn't coming back to. I leaned back in the chair in my small home office, laptop open, spreadsheet on the screen. My own business, my rules, my hours. No corporate elite dictating my worth. No whispers of judgment following me from room to room. Just me, a strong coffee, and a plan to build something real. The phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down. Unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, shrugging, I typed a quick text back. Wrong number. I smiled at myself. That was me now. Selective. Careful. Later that week, I met up with a couple of new friends at a local diner, a pair of guys I connected with through a networking event for small business owners. Simple, honest people, the kind I felt at ease with instantly. Man, this place has the best pancakes, said Jason, scraping syrup off his plate. You'll never get service like this in some high-rise cafe. Yeah, I replied, sipping my coffee. I like simple. Keeps life from getting complicated. They laughed, and I realized I hadn't felt that relaxed in months. Not since before Sabrina's betrayal. I was starting to enjoy myself again, testing the waters of dating. Not seriously, not yet, but casual dinners, small conversations, laughter that didn't carry the weight of suspicion. The world was full of possibilities again, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel trapped in someone else's narrative. One Saturday morning, I stopped at a cafe on my way to the office. I liked the small, independent ones. The baristas remembered your order after a visit or two, and the place didn't feel like a showroom for wealth and status. I noticed her immediately. Cassandra Grant. She was in line ahead of me, perfectly polished, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. Her hair looked freshly styled, designer bag in hand. For a moment, I considered turning around, leaving her to her own world. But then she spotted me and smiled. That same thin, practiced smile she used to wield like a weapon. "Richard," she said, her voice chirping as though we were old friends. I leaned casually against the counter, coffee in hand. "Cassandra, fancy seeing you here." She tilted her head, trying the warmth she used so effortlessly at the office. I didn't expect, you look good. Really settled. I smirked, a slow, confident curl on my lips. Settled, yeah? Finally, I get to set my own pace. No more corporate games, no more elite judgment. Her eyes flickered. She tried to maintain composure. "I hope things are easier for you now. Less stressful." I chuckled. "You could say that. Less stress, more freedom, more breathing room. Life's easier when you don't have to worry about other people's trash." She blinked, clearly not expecting that jab, and murmured something polite before moving away. I took a slow sip of coffee and watched her leave, enjoying the satisfaction that came with walking through life on my terms. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, the name was unmistakable. Sabrina. Sabrina. "Richard, please. We need to talk. I made a mistake." I stared at it for a long moment. The temptation to respond, to confront, to argue, passed quickly. I deleted the message. No pause, no hesitation, no second chance. Deleted. I set the phone down on the counter and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline, the lights flickering like opportunities waiting to be seized. Over the next few weeks, it settled into a rhythm. I met clients in my small office, attended workshops to expand my business skills, and even took up early morning runs along the river. Life felt mine again. I started noticing details I'd overlooked in the old life. The way the air smelled after rain, how sunlight glinted off windows at certain angles, the simplicity of having someone genuinely smile at you in a cafe, without ulterior motives. It was liberating. One evening, a friend I met through networking invited me to a small party. Casual, relaxed, people laughing over grilled burgers and beers in the backyard. I caught myself noticing the contrast with the corporate events I'd endured, the pretension, the whispered glances, the hidden agendas. Here, there was nothing but honesty. I chatted with a woman named Claire, funny, sharp, her eyes sparkling when she laughed at my sarcastic remarks. I didn't overthink it. I didn't compare her to Sabrina. I just enjoyed the conversation, the ease of being with someone who wasn't part of a game. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. A week later, I took a walk in the park and saw a family feeding pigeons near the fountain. Kids squealing, parents laughing. The whole scene banal yet perfect in its simplicity. I felt a twinge of the old bitterness, but it was small, manageable. It had no power over me anymore. I knew what I'd lost and I acknowledged it, but I didn't dwell on it. I had chosen the path forward. That night, I sat at my desk, reviewing some contracts, my coffee steaming beside me. The city lights glimmered through the window. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was just a notification from a new client. No lingering messages from the past. No reminders of betrayal. I smiled. The thing about trash, if you leave it long enough, it starts to stink on its own. And sometimes you don't have to touch it. You just have to walk away.